Alright, hello everyone, welcome to Midweek Gaming. I'm Nico inside of the comms, of course, Justin, and we do video game commentary with no script on this channel. So if it sounds, well, unscripted, now you know why. We don't do scripts here. So, this week in the show, thought we'd do something a bit easier, but, well, much easier, I would say, to cover. Well, at least for us, than our usual, much bigger stuff. This will actually be a continuation of what we were talking about a few weeks ago, if you are a fan of the show, where we talked about the U.S. video game strike, with the voice actors striking against AI. Very interesting topic, very necessary, I would say, considering companies will do anything to save a buck. And when you give them the power to basically make Siri do all your voice work, yeah, they're gonna make Siri do all the voice work for like 1/10 of the cost, if anything. So it's definitely good to see voice actors are kind of putting their foot down and being like, don't. Of course, I'm oversimplifying this matter, but it's a quick recap just so we're all kind of caught up to speed. Go check out our video. I think it was like 2 weeks ago when we covered this to get much more of an in-depth opinion of our thoughts on it at the time. Well, it was kind of, I want to say old news, but it had been going on for quite a while. But yeah, so this week we actually got, well, last week I should say, we have a little bit of a development in the story. Turns out some big names in the UK voice actor, some big UK-based voice actor talent are actually coming out and supporting the strike as well, publicly. And the reason I say this is because this does actually show that there is a bit more of an also international, like there is a bit of an international solidarity to this whole shtick. And I say that because it is primarily it's the UK, US, excuse me, US voice actors union striking against video game companies. And they have a whole list of video game companies, which includes things like EA, Activision, Ubisoft, Disney, Warner Brother. So pretty much all of them. Which now that I bring this up, I didn't bring this up in the last video we covered, but since Disney is involved and they do a lot of voice work just for their movies as well, it makes me wonder if beyond the video games industry, are we also going to see Disney's movies get affected because Disney probably does a lot of their voice work in house, and if Disney's getting striked against, is that going to push back movie release dates? I didn't actually think about that at the time.
Probably.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
There's a chance that it might end up creating some problems.
Yeah, so Disney's certainly not going to be happy about that. But
Where
then again,
is
I'm
my
sure they have
money?
many more ways. The mouse sitting in there. I can't do a Mickey voice, but just like picture Mickey just being like, money, drums up.
So you
Not
mean to
good."
tell me that you didn't get me my money? Because you
Go ahead, go ahead.
how many times?
Terrible, terrible. We cannot do Mickey impression.
I can do a Raka Raka Ronald McDonald, but not a good Mickey Mouse.
Wrong company.
It's not a company.
Well, I mean, it's kind of a Ronald McDonald's. You can kind of say McDonald's, but it's like it's a knockoff McDonald's. It's a knockoff, so it's like,
the
eh.
point. That is the point.
But anyways, so yeah, some big UK voice talent is kind of coming out and backing it. One of those is actually, I'm gonna say, Doug Cockle. Cockle. Forgive me if I say her last name wrong. But he's actually a well-known voice actor himself, and he actually is the guy who, if you don't know, actually played the voice of Geralt of Rivia in the Witcher series. So if you play the Witcher games, that's his voice you're hearing throughout the whole game. Games I've actually played, and it's actually really good what he does. He actually kind of came out and voiced support. His words were, here we go. Some studios have actually stopped making their games, so the voice actor industry has slowed right down, he tells the BBC News. Well, the article actually talking about all this, by the by, is actually from the BBC, so link down in the description if you want to read it. But he continues to say, the actors in the SAG AFTRA, I think it's pronounced, aren't just striking for themselves, they're striking for the creative industries across the world. If they can strike a good deal, that could be a template for other industries.
So you know.
That's interesting that he's kind of pointing out the fact that if the U.S. can kind of cut a deal, it'll also kind of maybe force or set the tone for other industries or other groups of voice actors across the world, I would say. Which he's not wrong. Another one to come out and voice support is Henry McEtry, who actually played the voice of Neo in Neo. Sorry, it's been a while since I played the game, but Xenoblade Chronicles 3. And it was interesting. He went on to say himself that I think it's fascinating that the actors in the U.S. are doing what they're doing at the moment. And he continues saying that, as with a lot of things, as goes the U.S., so follows everywhere else. Forgive me, my brain had a hiccup there. And they can start to get these things in place. It can become industry standard, not just in the U.S. So, kind of continuing on what Doug said, saying, kind of the idea of this can set industry standards, which is again very true. He added that he's frustrated actors in the UK won't be able to strike in solidarity as there's no legal support for it. And this is actually an interesting point to bring up this, and I think I know what he's referencing here, because if you don't know, I myself am actually in the UK at the moment, in university. And the reason why he says that there's no UK support, if I'm interpreting this correctly, which I might not be, again, I'm not a super in depth with UK laws, but from what I've been able to learn so far, unlike in places like the US where you're actually protected if you strike, like there are legal precedents for you can strike and you cannot be fired from your job if you strike, which I think is kind of one of the reasons strikes are such a big thing in the US, because there's a lot more protection for employees that they don't have to risk losing their jobs.
Yep.
If memory serves, in the US, or in the UK, excuse me, there's actually no such protection.
Nope.
You strike in the US, or the UK, goodness gracious, US, UK. If you strike in the UK, there is no legal precedent for the company to keep you. You can very easily just get canned and someone else replace you. So it is interesting.
Yeah, that's the big thing overall. The UK laws, especially when it comes to like free speech and everything, are vastly different. You're allowed to have free speech, but there's so many things set up in the UK that just a lot of people would very easily take for granted.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like a lot of people say, US is very capitalist and so very for the company, and they're not wrong when they say that, but compared to some other countries, even countries that are also pretty decent themselves, such as again the UK, there's surprisingly a lot of laws in the books that still protect employees, probably because just how universally scummy US businesses are in general,
Yep.
that force those laws to exist. But compared to things like the UK, which again is a great place to work and everything else, but it's like there are also there's a lot more level of control to some degree that both the government and companies can have over their employees that no one really talks about unless it becomes relevant. But it is good to know.
Yes. So, those are key points that are important because it does change up the dynamics of a couple things.
Which does kind of go to show you, right? Like the reason the US is doing this and they're doing this by themselves, it seems, is kind of like I said, going back to what is mentioned here by these voice actors and kind of implied by kind of stated by both Doug and Harry himself straight up says that, there's no protection for UK-based talent. The US is in a position where they can strike and kind of can force companies to change their policies. And if they can force their policies, then for companies and countries like the UK, where talent legally doesn't have the protection to be able to do that, they can kind of point to it as kind of like, precedent says X, so give us X. So it's a lot easier to kind of bargain without having to go full strike. So yeah, the kind of general tone here is that if this does end up getting through, which I don't see why it wouldn't, companies are just dragging their feet because they will do anything to save a buck. That this will definitely change up the voice actor industry, and it's interesting to see that they bring up the fact that the industry has kind of slowed down as a whole because of this strike, which makes sense because like the big names on this list are some of the biggest makers and the biggest movers and shakers in the video games industry. Not so much Disney. Disney hasn't been making their own games since, oh lord, at least the mid to early 2010s, if not before. The last game I remember them making was like an Xbox party game. One good game they did make was Spectrobes, but that's just me reminiscing. Great music in that game, but anyways. Someone bring back Spectrobes. Get a petition. I demand it. Give it to me. I want to see it brought back on the Wii, on the Switch. I'm gonna say the Wii, but they did actually make a Spectres game for the Wii, funny enough. But anyways, they haven't been making their own games for a long time. But other industries brought up here. Like freaking Activision, Ubisoft, EA, these are, love them or hate them, some of the biggest movers and shakers in the industry, especially because Activision is now kind of, they are owned by Xbox these days. So if they're striking against Activision, they're kind of striking against Xbox by extension, you could say.
Yeah, in some
So,
kind of extension, yeah.
so yeah, it's definitely a lot of the biggest names in the industry are being impacted here. So it's definitely going to slow down the games in development in the short term, anyway. Thankfully, so far we've only seen Genshin impacted. Genshin impacted. Oh, good lord. I should choose my words more carefully. That was a pun I didn't mean to do. But yeah, it is interesting though. Anyways, the article just kind of goes on to say that, the whole shtick about generative AI systems and how companies are kind of using it. Another actor who actually kind of threw his hat in is actually Alex Jordan, who was part of the Cyberpunk 2077. He himself feels, generative AI is kind of becoming the norm.
Yeah.
His exact words are, "I think if we don't take solid action soon, we're just going to see a kind of void of creativity further down the line." He goes on to say, "We're going to have to really work hard to correct that." Is that part of his? Yes, it is. The video game companies involved in negotiations have previously told Newsbeat that. This is the article themselves talking, but the companies told Newsbeat, they have worked hard to deliver proposals with reasonable terms that protects the rights of performers while ensuring we can continue to use the most advanced technology to create a great gaming experience for fans. Spokesperson Andrew Cooling said, which, if I might just be a bit cynical for a second, that just stinks of PR. They go on to say the robust AI protections we have offered are entirely consistent with or better than other entertainment industry agreements the union has signed. Alex himself says that he supports the SAG-AFTRA strikes and regularly contacts the union. He also says he's not helping with any promotion of a new game in solidarity with his striking colleagues in America. So he himself is not supporting any games as solidarity, which is good for him. Alex says he's frustrated the strikes haven't been sorted yet. He himself states, "Unless we can move on, it's going to harm the people at the bottom of the ladder."
Right.
And the three of them were speaking at London's MCM Comic-Con as part of the Dungeons & Dragons group National 6. More than 100,000 fans visited the show for a chance to dress up, play new games, etc., etc. The big thing that AI will never be able to do is interact with the community, Alex says. And I think that he's really true on. And I think that is an interesting point to bring up, right? Because, for companies, there's really no harm, well, financially or probably for many reasons, of bringing AI into the picture and bringing actors out, right? As far as the companies are concerned, a voice is a voice is a voice. It's just cheaper. But Alex kind of brings up a good point where it's like, Siri doesn't go to the convention. Siri doesn't go to the Comic-Con. Siri doesn't go to, Fan Expo in Canada or whatever. Name a convention.
Convention name.
That's not them. Yeah, insert your convention name here. That's the actors doing that. They're the ones interacting with fans. They're the ones hyping games. They're the ones, kind of behind it. A good example I can bring up, with all due respect, but a great example is the late Lance Reddick.
Yep.
Lance was an absolutely phenomenal voice actor who played in both video games and movies, but one of the most roles I remember him for is his role as, Commander Zavala in Destiny. And he was actually really into both the role and the community. And he was kind of I don't want to say the face, but definitely kind of the heart of the voice actor community for Destiny, I would say, for many years, because up until his untimely death, he had basically he played the role since its beginning 9 years ago. Well, 10 years now, but, he wasn't around for the final year, sadly.
Well, part of it. Not entirely, but part of it.
Yeah, part of it, I would say, is part of it. But anyways, it's kind of that thing of You know, he liked the community liked him, and everyone kind of rallied behind that, which is why when news of his passing went around, you know, there were, you know, kind of mass vigils held in game for his death, because, you know, the community liked him as a person for what he did. So, you know, Siri cannot do that.
Nope.
No, not at all. So I think,
Here's
yeah.
the important thing to know, because this kind of goes back to the whole like AI generated type stuff. It is a technology that we are all going to be using no matter what nowadays. Like that is just the way things are now. But
Right.
no matter what, it needs to be a healthy balance with things, because the more closer it is you make something that is close to what someone else naturally can make, the more and more you need to question, all right, but is this in some way technically stealing from them? Like, especially when it comes to someone's voice. If you're basically making something that's near identical to 100% identical to someone's voice, then at some point you gotta question it and yourself and wonder, like, am I in a way stealing their voice?
And that's the fun part, right? There are, and I have this, and for those who don't know, the reason my degree is actually in computer, or not computers, is in business management. And I have like 2 diplomas in business management on top of the degree I'm hoping to get at the end of this year, or next semester, which is the next year. Nah, whatever. Anyways, I spent a lot of time studying business management. And let me tell you, one of the biggest topics that always seems to come up in ethics is the fact that there are many things that are morally and ethically completely wrong, but there's no legal precedent to it.
Nope.
So it's
It's
like,
just left there.
yeah, it's just left there, and there's 100 reasons why that could be. Maybe the, you know, legal hasn't caught up. Maybe it's just not a topic that's been, you know, haven't dealt with before. AI is probably in that field, I would imagine. You know, it's things like that where, you know, morally and ethically you shouldn't do it, but companies still do it anyway because they're not breaking any laws. And at the end of the day, companies are more concerned with making sure they don't get sued rather than they're breaking any moral precedents.
Yes.
Activision. You know, it's stuff like that where, you know, it's unsurprising, right? And kind of going back to what we said earlier in the show, you know, the spokesman for the corporate side of things basically said, you know, we've offered them contracts and we've offered them consolidations better than, or, you know, at term with things they've agreed to in the past. But it's like, that's the thing though. We're not dealing with the problems of the past. I mean, one of the things the union even said that they're striking against, which I honestly do not doubt in the slightest that companies are doing, is that they are taking the voices of actors without either their consent, permission, or even paying them for it, and basically using it to train AI models, which I don't think I
Isn't
have to put two and two
exactly
together for the
fair.
crowd, but
See, no matter what, that 100% isn't fair, because you are still, like, that is 100% you are taking someone else's work and using it for your own gain. And in this
yeah,
case, using it for your own monetary gain.
yeah, and it's like, again, there's no real, you know, there, and again, the companies haven't confirmed or denied that. The union is just accusing them of it. But here's the thing: anyone who's been in this industry long enough knows for a fact that that is very believable for some of these companies. I can see EA or Activision pulling that without second thoughts at all. And they're doing it to train AI models based on the actor's voice. And again, as I said before, I don't think I have to put two and two together here, but I'll just draw the line for 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 uh, for ease of sake. You know, if they're doing that to train AI models, then smart money says they're doing it with the hope of one day being able to replace that actor with said model.
Yep,
Maybe not entirely, and maybe not completely at first, but I can wager that's the end goal.
that's what they're planning.
Yeah. And again, this is kind of not new technology in the industry. I mean, who remembers back in the days of the old GPSs where you'd have, you know, like Yoda or Darth Vader or stuff like that in the GPS? That was kind of the earliest iteration of kind of stuff we see now. But again, the tech was very primitive back then, and it was just, you know, it was Yoda and Darth Vader, which are more, you know, they're more homages than anything else, and it was completely harmless for the most part. But now we've got it being used on actual, you know, actors, and not for the sake of, you know, fun GPS voices, but possibly, in fact, I dare say extremely likely, for the possibility of straight up replacing them in the game, which yeah, that's not good. It hurts both their livelihood and also kind of going back to again what I think it was Alex or Harry, forgive me. Let me just go back and which one of them said it. I think it was yeah, it was Alex who said it was, it's not the AI interacting with the fans, it's, the people.
Yep.
But
The, eh.
but
That's
yeah,
that's what you get with company nowadays.
yeah. Honestly, on a side note, if I want to end it off here because I don't want to get this too long, but if I wanted to take a wager, because one or two of the companies have kind of crumpled slightly. The article does mention ever since the last company that kind of, I don't say crumpled, but like that came to the table and found a resolution, but it wasn't one of the big companies, right? And the article does mention since then there hasn't been any real breakthroughs or stuff like that. Just the negotiations have been extended. But if you want my 2 cents, the company that may end up being the one to probably I don't want to say crack, but the one that would eventually probably force the others into pushing for a resolution might be Disney. And this
True.
isn't to talk about Disney's morals or ethics. Don't get me wrong here. Disney has done some extremely shady shit on the shelves over the years. I will, as a man who holds stock in the company, I think I have somewhat of a right to say that.
Yes. Yes. They have done quite a number of
Very
questionable
minor stock.
things,
I have no say on
especially
it.
recently.
Yeah, minor stock. I have no real say in the decision making process, but I do have stock. But so I probably could legally say this, but they probably say it legally anyway. But the reason I say this is mostly due to the fact that, in a way, they kind of have a larger stake in this than EA or Activision or stuff like that. Maybe EA might because they're a private company, but at the end of the day, like when you know these companies, when you know how they work, it would probably be Disney because let's break it down, right? And again, there's Warner Brothers and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it's kind of the same conversation, but I'll just break it down bit by bit. When it comes to EA, they're kind of the easiest to, well, no, I'd say Activision's the easiest to debunk. Activision is owned nowadays by Xbox, as is Blizzard, but they've been together for so long, they're practically the same thing at this point. They basically have Xbox paying the bills. And Xbox probably has their own connections and ways of getting voice work done. Is it more of a hassle for Xbox? Are they pissed about it? Are they probably going to push Activision to make a resolution if this carries on long enough? Maybe. But at the end of the day, Activision is supported by Xbox, so financially they can kind of keep this going. And so long as they can justify it to Papa Xbox, they're probably fine. When it comes to EA has most of their money coming in from FIFA and FIFA Ultimate Team specifically, at least the last I checked, which is basically slot machine of, pull the wheel and get characters for, from real life sports teams, build your ultimate team, yada yada yada. Basically casino for sports. Sports betting without any of the actual fun.
Yeah.
But granted, I have heard recently there might be some developments with them losing the FIFA license, but yes, it was a while ago. But last I checked, they pulled most of their money from Ultimate Team. So at the end of the day, voice work isn't really where they make their bread and butter, and it's not really much of a big deal either. They can probably keep this going, maybe not as long as Xbox, but they definitely could if they wanted to. Plus, they're greedy enough to keep this going even out of spite, I would imagine. Activision. Then again, Bobby Kotick hasn't run Activision for a while, so maybe they're turning over a new leaf.
You never know.
I wouldn't bet on it though. Then that brings us to Disney. Disney is probably the biggest one with something to lose here, because as we kind of mentioned at the beginning of the show, as I kind of realized, they do a lot of things not related to gaming, like animated movies, for example.
Yeah.
And voice actors are obviously kind of important for animated movies, unless we want to go back to the age of the silent film, which I don't think we do. So,
Let's
they've got a
not.
lot of, yeah, they got a lot riding on this, right? Like, at the end of the day, say what you will about Disney, their main bread and butter for money has always been movies, whether it be through the studios they own or through their own work. Theme parks and cruises and whatnot aside, they make their money through their IPs, which they make in movies. And yeah, they have live action movies, but Disney Animation is where they started, and it's probably their biggest moneymaker, I would say, these days. Still by far. I would take a crack at saying that.
It's a
Granted, I
safe
know
bet to say.
it's a safe bet to say, yeah. I don't have their finances, but it's a safe bet, I would wager.
Hmm.
So the longer
I
this
think
drags
a good
on,
chunk of it, though, is likely from sales from toys and stuff, from like
yeah, that's true
deals
as
that
well.
they have set up there.
Yeah, that's true as well, and that's a good point to bring up. They can kind of offset it through toy sales and stuff like that, but
Mm.
that depends on how well the IP is doing. But who knows?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they're kind of the ones with the most to lose because the longer this drags out, the less they can make movies, the less money they make. And I don't know if you've been paying attention to Disney recently, but they're kind of in a little bit of a clusterfuck at the moment. So they kind of need all the money they can get. Not to say that they're going broke, but it's a bit of a turbulent time for Disney these days, especially where things like Star Wars are concerned. So I don't know. I could be completely wrong and off basis here, but that's just my 2 cents. What do you think, Justin?
Mm, no, overall, you're right in the whole idea that Disney's probably the one who's gonna end up initializing most of the change for a lot of things.
Mm. So we will see. Anyways, that's this week's show. Hope you all enjoyed. And yeah, hope this gets resolved soon because I want to have my Genshin voices back, please. I don't mind playing in Japanese, but it's...
anime.
let me indulge in the weebness. But anyways, have a good day, everybody. Have a good night wherever you are. It's like 6 p.m. over there. I'm told it's like 12 or 1 p.m. over in Justin's area back in Canada. So wherever you are, whatever it is, have a good one. Nah, well, details.
Details.
Anyways, y'all have a good one, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you all enjoyed and see you all next week. Bye-bye, everybody.